Well, hello and very good morning, a very good afternoon, and a very good evening based on the time in which you'll be watching this video. I'm also hoping that every one of you is doing fine. Everyone in your family is also doing okay, and also hoping that every one of you is uh, taking all precautions and staying safe from the virus, and also making full use of your time. And then, well, welcome to yet another episode, or yet another version, or yet another lecture of or video lecture for 10th standard. In the previous class or in the previous lecture, we were doing about or we were talking about the adjournment motion. Now we had learned that the adjournment motion is raised whenever there is something, or so as to raise some very important question, or so as to raise a very pertinent issue which is happening in the country, or so as to ask the government, or so as to corner the government about something. Next, the other two kinds of motion, and very important motion in a democracy, those two motions are the censure motion and the vote of no confidence, or the motion of no confidence. What is the censure motion? The censure motion, what does actually censure mean? Censure means so as to put aside, or so as to keep aside something, or so as to bring up something, or so as to uh, pinpoint out, or so as to pinpoint something. So when we are talking of that, this censure motion, the censor motion or the censure motion, what actually happens in this is that the censure motion is used against a particular minister, a ministry, or maybe a few ministers or ministries, so as to question them and so as to corner them about the working of their or about the particular, or about some particular working or some particular issue regarding their ministry. And when this censure motion, when it is raised, what actually happens is that the opposition or some member of the parliament may be questioning the minister concerned, or may be questioning the ministry concerned about the, or about a particular issue which may have actually caused some problem, or which may not have been to the liking of the parliament, or which may not have been in the best interests of the country. So those kinds of issues can be raised, and when such an issue is raised, the minister concerned has to answer it. The minister concerned will be is empowered so as to defend himself or his ministry. After that, that motion is put to vote, and if that motion is passed, or if the majority of the members vote for that motion, what happens is that that minister, or the minister concerned, or a few ministers, those who are against whom the censure motion had been passed, they may be having to resign. But this censure motion does not. Okay, I'll be coming to that. And what happens in a no confidence motion? The first thing to be kept in mind about the no confidence motion is that the no confidence motion can be raised only and only in the Lok Sabha. What does no confidence mean? We, or while doing, or in the while starting the chapter, or somewhere in the chapter, I had told that, or you may have read somewhere, heard somewhere, that the executive, the prime minister and his council of ministers, are directly responsible to the parliament, and more importantly, it is actually directly responsible to the Lok Sabha. Why is it so? Because in a democracy, it is the people's government, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So the people who are running the government, they are answerable to the people. So the people cannot be questioning them directly. That is why it is the people's representative to whom the executive is answerable to. That is why we say that the government, or the union ministers and the executive, is directly responsible to the Lok Sabha. And that is why this Lok Sabha, or it is only in the Lok Sabha that a vote of no confidence, or motion of no confidence can be raised. What it actually means is that due to a particular issue, or due to something, or due to the malfunctioning of the government, or because the government was unable to function properly, unable to do out its duty, or do its duty properly, or carry out its duties properly, and not in the best interests of the nation, what actually happens is that it may lose the confidence of the people indirectly, and lose the confidence of the members of the parliament, or the members of the Lok Sabha directly. So this vote of no, or motion of no confidence, it is tabled. The motion of no confidence is tabled on the House floor, is raised when the parliament or when the Lok Sabha, the members of the Lok Sabha, they understand or they feel that the government isn't working properly and its working is hampering the progress of the nation, things like that. And that is why this no confidence motion is raised. And once this no confidence motion is raised, the government is or once this no confidence motion is allowed by the speaker or tabled by the speaker, what actually happens is that all other business and all other functioning of the parliament, the lawmaking or the legislative functions of the Lok Sabha is put aside, and then the no confidence motion is discussed. The government or the ministers of the government will be or are empowered to fight for themselves. I mean, not fight for themselves, so as to argue for themselves and to so as to speak for themselves, so as to defend themselves on the floor of the house. And after that, this motion of no confidence is put to vote. And when this motion of no confidence is put to vote, after that there is a voting which takes place. If the motion of no confidence gets passed by the majority votes of the members of the Lok Sabha, then the government, or then it is said that the government has lost the confidence of the people and indirectly, and lost the confidence of the members of the Lok Sabha or the parliament directly. And the government may have to or will have to resign after this, because a government cannot ethically function. A government cannot ethically function in the office after it has lost the confidence of the people, or has lost the confidence of the democracy. That is why the government has to resign, and all the council of ministers along with the prime minister, they resign after the no confidence motion gets passed by a majority vote. Now, what is the difference between the no confidence motion and the censure motion? This censure motion is not against the entire group of ministers or the council of ministers, the censure motion is not against the entire government, but the no confidence motion is raised against the entire government. When a member raises when a member of the parliament raises the censure motion, he has to point out, or he has to ask direct questions. There has to be a reason for raising this the censure motion. But when we are talking of the no confidence motion, then the no confidence motion can be raised against the entire government without having to underline or without having to mention or name the issue, why the member is wanting to raise this no confidence motion. Again, if the censure motion is passed, it does not mean that the entire government has to resign. It only means that some particular minister or a ministry is unable to function properly, and they may have to resign, but not the entire government or not the entire council of ministers. The passing of a censure motion does not mean that the government of the day will fall, but the passing of the no confidence motion actually means that the parliament or the Lok Sabha has lost the confidence in the government, in the executive, in the entire council of ministers and the prime minister. And that is why the entire council of ministers along with the prime minister, they have to resign from office, and it leads to the fall of government. So censure motion does not lead, or may not always lead to the, why am I saying this may not, I'll be explaining later on, but the passing of a censure motion does not always lead to the falling of the government, but the passing of the no confidence motion leads to the falling of or fall of the government. When I said that passing of the censure motion may not always lead to the fall of the government, why I said that, why I used that term may not, it was because, you see, when a the minister is functioning under the prime minister, and the minister is the group of, or is a member of the group of the cabinet or the council of ministers. So when a particular minister, or when maybe a few ministers are questioned and they are cornered, and a censure motion is passed against them, what it actually means is that that minister may have been cornered, that minister may have to resign, but it also means that that minister was the part of the entire group. That minister was working with the consent of the prime minister, and also in consultation with the other group or with the other cabinet ministers. So when a censure motion is passed, the opposition, they understand that, okay, if we could get a censure motion passed, then we can also get a vote of no confidence passed, or a no confidence motion may also get passed, because the censure motion was against the minister, and the minister is the part of the whole. It is not that the minister is something different from the whole. The minister is part of the entire council of ministers and the cabinet ministers, which includes the prime minister. So if the censure motion gets passed, at times it means that the government is cornered, and if the opposition wants, it can raise the no confidence motion after that, and if the no confidence motion gets passed after that, the government may fall. That is why, or the government will fall. That is why I said that the passing of the censure motion may at times cause the fall of the government too. Now, moving on, what are the adjournment motion, the censure motion, and the motion of no confidence was clear to you, all of you. If there were any doubts, please mention them in the comment section. Now, moving on, there are a few other functions of the parliament. That is the amendment. One such parliamentary function is the amendment of the constitution. The constitution this amendment of the constitution is given under the article 368 of the constitution. Why is the amendment, or why is any kind of an amendment required? You see, the Constituent Assembly, when they made the constitution, or when the constitution was framed way back in 1947 and 1948, and also in the years of 1949, and as you all know, the constitution was the draft was finished and the constitution was finished writing, and some of the provisions came into force on the 26th of November 1949, and the entire constitution came into force on the 26th of January 1950. So that day is also celebrated as you all know, the Republic Day, because on that day India was constituted, or India became a republic. Now, when the constitution framers, or the framers of the constitution, or the constitution makers, when they made the constitution way back, or maybe 60-70 years earlier, when they were making the constitution, the constitution they made, they did not, or they never knew, or as I am talking of this year 2020, sitting over here in 2020, we do not know what may happen somewhere in 2090. So we will not be able to predict what happens in 2090. So suppose we are doing something now, we are trying to frame a constitution now. Suppose we are framing the constitution, and we are the constitution makers. Me, you, everyone who is watching this video, we are the constitution makers. So we cannot be envisaging, or we cannot be thinking, or we cannot be predicting what may be happening 50 years, 60 years down the line. And we cannot be framing the constitution thinking of what may happen, because we do not know what will happen 50, 60 years down the line. So when we will be framing a constitution sitting today in 2020, we will be framing the constitution keeping the situation scenario of 2020, and maybe a few 5 years, 10 years, that scenario will be kept in mind, or will be in our mind, and then we will be framing the constitution. That was also the case when the constitution was framed way back in 1947, 48, 49. So when the constitution framers, they were framing the constitution, they did not know what will be happening 50 years, 60 years down the line, or maybe 20 years also down the line. So they did not know what may be happening. And if they made a very rigid constitution, that whatever was written then in the constitution cannot be changed, can never be changed, it will be always so. If they had made such a rigid constitution, then maybe we would have discarded that constitution long back, because that constitution would not have catered to the times, or that constitution would not have been sufficient for the times, or for the times after 20 years or 30 years after framing the constitution. That is why the framers of the constitution had a very far insight, or they were very far sighted, and they understood that this constitution which they were making, that should be rigid, and that should be flexible, not very rigid, and also not very flexible. So they kept the balance between a very rigid constitution and a very flexible constitution. Indian constitution is more flexible than rigid. So they made the constitution such, and they also gave a provision for amending the constitution. What does an amendment mean? Amendment means bringing in changes, and those amendments are required so as to keep the constitution up to date with the changes in the times, changes in the society, changes in culture, changes in the mindset of the people, technological changes. That is why amendment to the constitution is needed. And the responsibility of amending the constitution lies with the parliament, because the parliament is the legislative body as of now. Previously, it was the Constituent Assembly, which was the legislative and the deliberative body. They used to legislate. They thought of the different provisions, articles, different laws, and then they put it in the Constitution. But right now, we do not have a Constituent Assembly, so it is the Parliament which is having the legislative powers, and the power and also the function of amending the Constitution lies with the Parliament. The Parliament may, or the constitution makers had empowered the parliament to be able to amend the constitution based on the times. There are a few provisions of the parliament, there are a few articles in the constitution which do not require a special majority. A simple majority is enough so as to amend that provision. A few of the articles in the constitution may require or do require special majority. What is special majority? Special majority means suppose or whenever the parliament is in session, not all the 545 members of the Lok Sabha suppose are in that session. Maybe 500 members are only in the session. So the total number of members who are attending the parliament that day when this constitution amendment is being voted upon is 500. So 2/3 of that 500 members, or 2/3 of the members, or 2/3 of 500 will have to vote for the constitution or for the amendment to the constitution. And this 2/3 of 500, what is 2/3 of 500? Or let us just make it 510 for easier calculation. So when we are talking of 2/3 of 510, what is it? What is the number? It is 340. So 340 members have to vote for the amendment to the constitution, and this 2/3 of the members present and voting will also have to be the majority of the entire house. So what is the majority of the entire house of 545? It is 273. So 273, whenever or when a constitution or whenever there is something called special majority, just try to understand, when we are talking of special majority, what it actually means is that there has to be the majority of 2/3 members, or something which is, suppose an article, suppose a bill A, a bill or a motion A is being raised and is being voted upon. So the bill A, the bill named A, will have to be passed by 2/3 members of that house who are present on that day or are present during the time when this voting is being done, and they are voting. So 2/3 of the members present and voting will have to agree or will have to pass the bill. So if suppose I was telling 510 members are present in the house, so 510 members, so 2/3 of that 510 will have to vote for the bill. So what is 2/3 of 510? It is 340. And special majority has another thing which says that 2/3 of members present and voting will also have to be more than half, or will have to be the majority of the house. So what is the majority of the Lok Sabha? It is 273 members, and 2/3 of the members who were present and voting out of those 510, so 340 had voted for it. Is 340 more than the majority of the house? Yes, 340 is more than the majority of the house of the Lok Sabha, that is 273. So this bill gets passed. So in constitution amendment also there are a few provisions, or there are a few articles in the constitution which can be amended only by 2/3 majority and also by the majority of the house, that is the special majority. This is called the special majority. So some constitutional provisions can be amended only by the special majority. A few can be amended, or most can be amended only by simple majority. But in a few cases which require, or a few articles are there such in the constitution which can be amended, or which will be amended only when more than half of the states are ratifying it, or more than half of the states are agreeing to it. So the state assemblies, the Vidhan Sabhas of the state, they will also be passing the, or they will also be voting on the constitution amendment, and they also have to pass it. And more than half of the states of India will have to pass that constitution amendment bill. Only then it becomes a constitutional amendment act. And there is one thing to be kept in mind, that not, okay, everything of the constitution can be amended, but but all the constitutional amendments which are there will have to, will, this is something called the judicial review. We'll be doing it when we do the chapter judiciary. But just keep in mind that the constitution can be amended, but the basic feature of the constitution cannot be changed. What is the basic feature of the constitution? Just so as to understand the basic feature, all the things which are promised to us in the preamble, that makes up the basic feature, more or less. So the basic features of the constitution cannot be amended. That is why, okay, we can say that everything in the constitution can be amended, but the basic feature has to remain intact, or the basic features, or what the constitution is wanting to give us, or what the constitution makers had in mind, that is given in the preamble. So that basic feature, those things which are mentioned in the preamble, anything which hampers the preamble and the basic feature of the constitution, any such amendment will be struck off by the judiciary or by the Supreme Court. This we'll be doing later in the, when we do the judiciary, or when we are doing judiciary, the Union Judiciary, the Supreme Court and the High Courts. Now moving forward, there are a few other functions of the Parliament, that is the electoral function. The Parliament, the elected members of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, along with the elected members of the Vidhan Sabha, they are electing, or they elect the President of India. The members of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, the elected members of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, they are electing the Vice President of India. Also there is the election of the Speaker, the Chairperson of the Deputy Chairpersons of the Rajya Sabha. So there are some electoral functions also of, these are the electoral functions of the Parliament. There are a few other functions like the judicial powers. The Parliament can, the houses of the Parliament, they can vote on and they can remove the President if it is found that the President is making or is acting unconstitutionally. So impeachment of the President can also happen. Impeachment of the President will be covered in the chapter of President, but this is also a function of the Parliament. Then there is the impeachment of the removal of the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court, the Chief Justice of India. All these functions and powers also lie with the Parliament. Other functions and powers of the Parliament is that the Parliament can establish one or establish higher courts or newer higher courts or higher courts for any state. It can establish one high court for 2 or more states and union territories. These are functions of the Parliament. It can also change the nature of or change the boundaries of a state, increase the area of a state, or merge 2 states together, or divide and bifurcate a state. So these are also functions of the Parliament. So Parliament is actually the supreme legislative body of our country, and it is the Parliament which upholds the democracy of our country. The parliamentarians are the ones who are the upholders of the democracy, and it is the Parliament which is actually carrying out the wishes and the dreams and the aspirations of the people. Okay, at times we may be thinking that the Parliament is not actually able to or capable of representing or maybe bringing or carrying out our dreams and aspirations. But then it is the Parliament, and it is through the Parliament only that such things and are the fulfilling of our dreams as a nation and aspirations as a nation can be carried out. It is only through the Parliament. That is why the Parliament is the temple of democracy, as it is said. A few other things are left in this chapter. It will just take one more video lecture, I guess. So please stay on with me, and if possible, please watch the entire video so as to know and so as to understand. Please do not jump to the assignments, and please do not jump to the questions at the end of the book. without watching this video, or maybe not just my video, you can watch any video on the internet, but please do watch entire things. Just reading the book may not give you the entire information which is required. So please refer to this video or any other such informative videos which is there on the internet, and if possible do subscribe to this channel. It feels good, stay safe. Also be safe, keep happy, or sorry, be happy, keep everyone around you happy, keep everyone in your family happy, and enjoy this time with your family. Please move aside from the phone a bit and give the family some time. So thank you.